Over at DC Comics, the publisher has been doing something really fascinating as of late by utilizing characters from the Wildstorm universe into the DC Universe proper publishing line. It's been an absolute blast checking out Stormwatch Down with the Kings, published over in the Batman the Brave and the Bold comic book, featuring writing from Ed Brisson and art over from Jeff Spokes. The aspect about that series that really had me interested in what a new Stormwatch would look like was how Ed Brisson took some of the plot threads over from Batman Incorporated and also utilized them for this new run. One such character who has also been added over to the roster of Stormwatch is Ravager, also known as Rose Wilson, the daughter of Deathstroke. Currently, the DC Universe has been plunged into the Night Terror storyline, where the character known as Insomnia is searching for the Nightmare Stone and plunge the DC Universe into some of their nightmares. My name is Arico Braddock, and today, let's go ahead and dive in to the pages of Night Terror's Ravager issue number 1 to see what elements of Stormwatch are carried into Rose's book in the midst of a horror-themed DC Comics storyline. But before we get deeper into the video, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button if you enjoy our content. And I want to go ahead and introduce Night Terror's Ravager number 1 with DC Comics solicitation text to give you some additional context over on this series. Defend your life, Rose Wilson. Ravager is separated from Stormwatch and trapped in a nightmare world where she must protect her younger self from being consumed and corrupted by the Murder Man and his blood-crazed Slaughter Squadron. Can Ravager protect a young Rose Wilson without losing her own identity? Why does the Murder Man seem so familiar, and how does he know so much about Rose? Want to go ahead and introduce Night Terror's Ravager with DC's creative team for the issue. Of course, this one is written by Ed Brisson, featuring art over from Dexter Soy, colors from Veronica Candini. We have letters from Troy Peteri, and the cover for the issue is coming in directly from Stormwatch Down with the King's artist Jeff Spokes. Really appreciate the kind of characterization that Spokes lends to characters, and really also appreciate this kind of pose that Rose is striking in the midst of a sort of graveyard behind what looks to be a sort of nightmarish version of her father, Deathstroke. I think that this cover adds a lot of context on Night Terror's Ravager. I want to extend a big thank you over to Adventures in Poor Taste for posting this preview of the series as well. And let's go ahead and kick our review off by checking in over on Dexter Soy's art in Night Terror's Ravager. Dexter Soy definitely lends a sort of disheveled and distorted line over to the issue. And due to the fact that the subject matter in this book is so intense and so dark, focusing in on some of the earliest points in Rose's life and also showcasing, how much progression there has been for her as a character, I think that this sense of line from Soy actually lends a bit more nuance over to the storyline. I think Soy is an incredibly specific artist over at DC, and I like seeing his art in the context of more kind of horror-centered stories. So really appreciated the kind of line work and sense of page design that Soy added to the issue as well. Now, if I could go ahead and kind of critique one aspect of Soy's art over in the issue, I think the artist still kind of suffers from some of those facial expressions with the characters kind of changing from panel to panel, and some of that line not being kind of as intact as I'd like it to be. Still, I think Night Terrors as a whole has done a great job focusing in on some of the more expressionistic side of the creators of the DC Universe. For instance, I think Howard Porter brought a really interesting line that's out of the ordinary with Night Terror's First Blood, and with Night Terror's Batman. I think the line that Guillaume March uses is also really curvy and is contrasted very nicely over with Dexter Soy. I just wish we had more attention paid to some of the facial expressions for the characters, so it was a little bit easier to engage with the story in some sequences. Now, in terms of the narrative here, I actually thought this book was quite adept at telling an emotional story centered around Rose, and I like the fact that a lot of that kind of Wildstorm continuity seems like it's going to be detached from the book until it isn't. So I think the way that this issue kind of teases you with some of that information and then gives you the status quo towards the end was a really kind of fascinating element of this series. Also, I think some of the nightmare aspects of this book as well were fleshed out relatively well here. I wish there was a little bit more kind of plot threads introduced from Ed Brisson, but I do realize the fact that this is a kind of two-issue story and that a lot of these plot threads have to be wrapped up over in two issues. So it's hard to take on, big sprawling narratives. But that being said, I still wish there was a little bit more connective tissue over from the kind of Stormwatch title, because I think it definitely had the chance to add just a little bit more intrigue. That being said, I definitely can appreciate what's here. Also, I really like the fact that Ed Brisson delves so deep into Rose's past with this kind of younger version of her that she's helping throughout the issue. The way that this story leaves off with this character leads to a pretty dramatic finale that I think will serve to, make Rose grow as a character, because she's sort of forced into a corner by the final moments of the story as a whole. Also, I think this book does a good job kind of referencing what came before in Christopher Priest's long-running Deathstroke run that dealt extensively over with Rose, and think that some of that characterization is kept intact between those two runs as well. So at the end of the day here, I think that Night Terror's Ravager #1 is a solid issue that left me wanting a little bit more in terms of the characterization of Rose, as well as some of the elements with the greater Wildstorm series. But I appreciate some of these kind of little elements of characterization. I also really appreciate the fact that DC is kind of shadow publishing a couple of these Wildstorm comics. As last week we were able to get the introduction of the next adventures of Stormwatch in Batman the Brave and the Bold. I really hope that eventually DC decides to take on an ongoing series with Ed Brisson and Jeff Spokes in terms of the Stormwatch title, and I'm hoping that this is yet another roadblock in the lead up over to that series. I want to know from you, what are some of your thoughts over on Night Terror's Ravager? Did you enjoy this kind of exploration of Rose's past? And what are your thoughts on the new Stormwatch team? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for coming to check out our review of Night Terror's Ravager. We'll be back to cover everything Wildstorm, Ed Brisson, Jeff Spokes, and Night Terrors. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.